Welcome to Vantage Point Podcast, a podcast brought to you by NWR Communications and 92 Studio. This podcast is intended for education and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Welcome back to the latest episode of Vantage Point, where we aim to get behind the leading minds of exciting entrepreneurial and growth companies. And today we are joined by Gentrack CEO Gary Miles. Gentrack's a provider of essential software and services to the utilities and airport industries. Its CEO, Gary, is a serial entrepreneur who has successfully founded and sold two B2B software enterprise businesses and took the reins of Gentrack in October of 2022 when the stock was trading around $1. Fast forward to today, the stock's trading above $6. And during this episode, Gary talks us through the company investment thesis, solutions, and its position within the market it plays in, and how he manages the company ethos and culture. Gary's an energetic guy, and it's hard not to think there's more growth to come under his leadership, combined with the tailwinds the company is well positioned to benefit from. Gary, thanks so much for joining us today. You've been in Australia for 3 months, which is very unlike you, I would imagine. But just to give the listeners a bit of a background on you personally before we get into Gentrack, I think it was Amdocs you were previously. If you could just give your sort of career background and probably what attracted you to Gentrack 4 years ago as well.
Okay, so it's great to be here in Australia. I love it. I'm taking a hole out of the London winter. Down here for 3 months, and I've had an amazing trip so far, and we'll probably repeat it next year. My background from a professional perspective is I had a couple startups. Both of them lasted about 8 years. Both of them successful. Both of them in the B2B software, big enterprise space. The last one I sold to Amdocs, which is a $4 billion plus revenue company, 30,000 people, NASDAQ listed. And Amdocs does billing and customer care for about 20 to 25% of the world's telco revenues. So by far the market leader, AT&T, Vodafone, Comcast, Telefonica, Singtel, Optus, some of Telstra here, etc. So anyway, Gentrack doing very similar things for the utilities, billing and customer care for utilities, was a natural kind of comfortable place to land, but also different.
No, very good.
Yeah.
And in terms of just sort of breaking Gentrack down as a layman, just give us the background and investment thesis, what you do, who the customers are and whatnot.
The investment thesis, I think, is pretty straightforward. There is not a bigger program on the planet than rebuilding the way the world generates and consumes energy. And so utility providers, now we're talking energy, to some extent water is a similar thing, but different pace and different challenges. But those energy suppliers that are out there, most of them have both generation and a retail book where they have customers, whether it's industry or individuals. The systems that run their business, the billing systems, the charging systems, the customer engagement systems, in this sector just are no longer fit for this transition. They don't do what they need to do, and they're really old. They're 20, 25 years old. So what Gentrack does is we supply modern solutions for energy and water suppliers to manage their customers, manage their revenue, manage their all their business, their regulatory requirements, and help them fulfill this energy transition. And just, Simon, the investment thesis is if this is a huge wave in the ocean, well-performing companies should outperform the market, and leading companies should provide excellent returns for their shareholders.
That makes perfect sense. And just in terms of, like, the company's been around 36 years.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a bit of a background, particularly on you joining? The stock was hammered, not because you joined, but the stock was hammered. The stock was hammered. Yeah. It's done incredibly well since you've joined. Just give us a background as to why you think it was hammered. I've heard you talk before around, when you joined it wasn't a turnaround story, but you viewed it as a growth story. Obviously, that's come to fruition. But just talk to us about the company history, but also G2.0 and how that sort of fits into it all.
Right. So, to be around, there's a lot of companies that came and went in 35 years. So to be around for 35 plus years, you have to have a lot of fundamentals right. one of the fundamentals that we have right is we have a really good book of customers that depend on us, and to move off of us is a risky proposition. What ended up happening is along that 36-year journey, there was a period of about 4 or 5 years where I think the some of the decisions that were made were bad ones, just to be blunt.
Yeah.
And anyway, I consider that you have a triangle of stakeholders that are very important. You have your shareholders, you have your customers, and you have your people. And I think you have to balance very carefully, making sure you look after all three stakeholders. And in this case, I think we dropped the ball a little bit. It's before my time, but on investing in technology for your customers, and maybe taking care of some of the people so you keep your talent. Anyway, and that, we focused a lot on shareholders. The stock went up, but then eventually the cards, came underneath, and we lost a few big customers, lost momentum, lost kind of mind share, and lost some mojo.
Yeah,
that was the big thing, and so. Yeah, they needed a new change at the helm, and so they decided to look around.
And I think I've heard you refer to the people within the business as Gentrackers. How do you sort of view yourself as a leader? And I've heard really good things personally about you. How do you view yourself as a leader, and how do you sort of try and drive culture across what is a growing employee base?
Look, we have a set of values which are based on respect for our customers, respect for our people, and respect for the planet. So I like to be a value-driven leader, and I think we've got a team that kind of walks the talk. My favorite one on respect, so respect for our customers, we're opinionated, and we get the job done, so they can depend on us. Respect for each other is that, we're one team, we play to win. Now that's if you break that into small pieces, we're one team, so we're a matrix organization, but we all work together. And we don't have a lot of politics in this company. Everybody's got each other's back, which is good. And then we play to win. We have a winning culture, and we have fun doing it. So I think we try to live by these things. If we say we're going to do something, we do it. And speak openly. I like to have an opinionated set of people around me, so we respect each other's opinion.
Not just yes people, yeah.
And just stick to doing the right thing by our brand and by our business, and people will resonate to that, I think.
And in terms of the market that you play in, obviously, utilities and water, and also airports. But what's driving? Obviously, there's this transformation and need to upgrade their systems and whatnot. When you look at the competitive landscape, why Gentrack, in terms of winning?
So you can put companies that do what we do into two buckets. You have the legacy players that are out there with older systems that we don't think are fit for this transition. SAP and Oracle together have about 75% market share around the globe. And then you have, and by the way, they have a modernization story. So they're trying to take their customers into this new era. Then you have new entrants or new technology players. We put ourselves in that boat, even though we've got 5,000 person years of utility know-how in the company, or historically, which is helpful to say the least. But anyway, it's interesting because this industry didn't transform for 25 years, it hasn't built a reservoir of 4 or 5 very capable players that know how to do it. So the new entrants, there's actually been several incidents where utilities have invested to buy a new system, and then the transformation didn't work. And they would roll back on SAP or something. That's not good for the industry. There's a few credible players. There's literally a handful of 2 or 3 right now. There'll be more over time that know how to do projects, that have good technology, that can spin up teams in other countries as you go global. But there's not a lot right now at this moment.
If you just sort of step back and talk us through the sort of financial background of the company in terms of performance. Your March year end, or
no, we're end of September.
End of September.
Yeah.
Just what that has looked like in the past and what you think is going to drive growth going forward.
So it's funny because we opened talking about Australia. When I joined the business, I couldn't get in. Couldn't get in New Zealand either. I'm domiciled out of London. We have a bunch of business in the UK, so it's a good place to be. But I wanted to come down here and see customers and see our employees and things. It was pretty tricky to do that. We're also in the middle of COVID, and the business was in a bit of trouble. So and I'm a first-time public company CEO, so it's a lot of kind
Learning.
of issues there to try to make sure to navigate carefully. So I was reluctant, and many companies were reluctant to put out numbers during COVID. Having said that, about 8 months in, I was getting more comfortable, and we had a strategy day, and we gave some midterm projections over 3 years that we would grow the CAGR at 10%. We just had a strategy days last November, so about 2.5 years after that, and it turns out that in reality we've grown the business. CAGR has been about 30% over the period, so we were able, along the course of that period, to continue to upgrade our forecast and things. I want to be a sleep well at night stock, where we deliver on what we say. We still have, now we're going international, so people say, hey, how big is that? We want to be cautious because we don't know what our conversion rate will be yet. But anyway, the growth is good.
And when you look at Australia, in terms of a market and how much growth can come from there, particularly from sort of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, how do you sort of look at that as a customer, sort of amount number from a revenue perspective? And how do you break that down from the sort of integration piece into ARR?
Yeah, so we break out the regions, and it's tricky because we report in New Zealand numbers, but Australia is around the $50 million mark. And I'm not giving any, because I don't want anybody to read into that. But anyway, it's been growing 22, 25, 27% since I joined. The dynamics of the Australian market, because of how many energy suppliers there are, because it's a very dynamic market compared to the rest of the world. I mean, people underestimate how advanced Australia is. It's pretty fantastic, actually. It's a hotbed for technology, actually. Because there's many players, and there's a pretty dynamic market, and a couple of the big players will look to re-platform. We foresee that growth rate in Australia continuing for the next several years, where you get a few deals in play each year. It's just not like a big bow wave where it's all happening in 3 years across the country. I think that's good for us because it allows us to pace that out over the time. And there's a good, healthy pipeline. We like it. And there's also the water opportunities here.
Exactly.
Which is,
And from a sort of B2C and B2B, how does that sort of break down and the different competitors in those buckets?
So we have some competitors that grew out of energy suppliers, like OVO has Kaluza, Octopus has Kraken. They predominantly only do B2C. That's because that's the kind of energy supplier that the parent company is. We do B2C and B2B. We also, in the same stack, do water and energy. So for example, we work in the Northern Territory where we support Power and Water Corp, which is power and water and network for all their consumers and all the industry in the territory. Not many systems can handle that, honestly. Those, Horizon Power out in the West, TasGas, TasPower, Tas Networks, actually AGL, Red, Lumo. Part of Energy Australia's book runs on us, all their battery and solar kind of new age pieces, parts of Alenta. So we have a really good presence here, but we plan to have a bigger presence in terms of market share as we continue to win deals.
And you've got quite a close partnership with Salesforce.
Yeah.
Can you just sort of give us a bit of a background on that? Why it gives you an edge, and do any of your competitors have that same level of integration and partnership?
So it's pretty straightforward. You have different theaters of war. We try to analyze the one that we're in. SAP is by far the incumbent around the world. So their old system that they've declared end of life, which it's creating a compelling RFP event for the planet, utilities perspective. So it's a pretty. By the way, when I took this job, that wasn't announced. So that was a nice little,
little tailwind,
little welcome gift in the mail, so to speak. But anyway, so SAP has a billing system that they're declaring end of life, and they're trying to move them to their new system. And they have a CRM to manage the customer front end. Now, in the old days, when you had a man or woman in a van going around every 6 months and reading your meter and giving you a static bill, like how often when did you call your energy retailer last?
No, I don't think I've ever called them.
Right. So you didn't need that much of a CRM. Now, when you're getting into pumping power into the grid and dynamic pricing, or maybe you're getting broadband and mobile or insurance from your supplier, there's all the more reason to have a good CRM.
Yeah.
So SAP has a dual problem that they have the incumbent has an end of life with their billing stack and their CRM. We respect our competitors, but it's not that great. It's not Salesforce. So if I'm going around the world, and not everybody knows Gentrack. As a matter of fact, most countries didn't. Now more and more are, but most countries for sure didn't. But they know Salesforce. So we rock up with Salesforce, and they have a great stack. But when it comes to talking about energy and how you look after vulnerable customers, in this scenario you get these meter reads, we're able to drive a lot of that communication, leverage their technology, leverage their brand, and I think it works well for both companies.
And in terms of from a support perspective around Salesforce and Gentrack, you lead all of that and you get paid for that as well. Is that right?
So we generally don't resell Salesforce licenses. There's a lot of value. Salesforce likes to sell licenses direct, and we want to respect that. There's benefits to the customer, and quite frankly, they don't need margin stacking of our stuff on top of their licenses. But it is nice for customers to have one throat to choke. And so since we've integrated Salesforce and ingested it and as part of our solution, because it's all connected, then if something like a regulatory issue comes, we can land it. If there's an issue, we can meet the service level agreement. So this is an obligation for us, but also if there's an opportunity, when they call us. Yeah. So we take accountability for the end-to-end solution, but we work hand in hand with Salesforce to make sure that we're working together.
No, it makes perfect sense. And just in terms of from a R&D and innovation perspective, what's your sort of view? Obviously, rolled out G 2.0 with success. How does that look into the future? So G 2.0 is resonating very, very well with our customer book. Genesis just took it for all of their modernization. Internationally, as we go through as we start to engage with a bunch of utilities around the world, and we're moving through and get shortlisted, and it's resonating very well. I think it's good. There's a lot to do, in this energy and water transition, so we will continue to invest probably 15% of our revenue in R&D every year. We've just brought in a new CTO. Yep. That's basically announced this week. Mark Rees, he's the CTO of the last 5 years of Xero, which was a big New Zealand success story listed here in Australia. And we're happy to have him join us. Great. Yeah, I think he'll, accelerate things further. So it's good. It's good. And at the same time, you've just announced around Amber Electric, and you just give us a bit of a background around the rationale of that deal.
Yeah, so that's also a fun one. We're in the billing and customer care business, and we want to go into a 5-10 million meter point and help them with their entire customer base. Do the billing, the care, everything. As they transition that customer base to support EVs and solar and battery, or even industry with big batteries and solar farms and things, you need to be able to manage a decentralized intermittent grid, and you can do that with batteries really well. Amber Electric is a technology company here in Australia. We're leading that round. It's a $29 million round. And they are also a retailer, but they make their money off technology. And what they do is they get on the side of the consumer, give them a product that allows the consumer to have solar and battery and get paid to fill that battery and pump it into the grid when it makes sense to do it and make money, or fill their house and reduce dependency on the grid and, carbon usage, etc. They're getting a lot of uptake from new controlled batteries in the market. It's really, really interesting technology, and the agreement that we have with Amber is not only to invest, but to install our billing system in their operation, productize the integration, and take this technology around the world.
Which again provides another edge in terms of your proposition to different retailers and whatnot.
I think so. They've had a lot of demand, but they're here, in Australia, and it's hard to take software like this around the world. And so I think we have 60 plus customers that we can talk to about it today. Plus we can take it into our pipeline, and it's definitely an interesting proposition.
And what is, because you've got basically that sort of perpetual licenses on the old existing customers, how does that sort of look rolling into G 2.0 in the future?
So we actually transitioned a lot of our book from license and maintenance perpetual to recurring before, even on our prior technologies.
Yeah.
With G 2.0, because of the technology is more cloud native, and you can do some of the, even with the older license model of having recurring revenues, some of it was on-prem. So now we're in cloud, continuous integration, continuous deployment. We can, and I think we're going to be able to bring a lot more value to our customers and to charge for that and help them, instead of manage it on-prem, manage it in the cloud. So that'll be a positive development for our revenue mix, to have less services, more software over time. But that's a journey that'll take a while.
And you spoke about Genesis that you've just recently won. How long does that take to implement?
So Genesis had a strategy day in November, and they came out with some numbers. So this is nothing proprietary here. But we're starting with their consumer book, and then we're going to do their enterprise book. Most of it's this year on the consumer side, and the enterprise next year. Normally, a transformation would take us anywhere from 5 months. Like we did a program here with Energy Australia in 5 months, which is pretty fast. To 24 months. If it's a big nationwide operator and you're doing it for 15 million meter points plus industry and everything, it may even take a little bit longer. But you would stage that in a way where you'd get benefits quickly.
And just on meter points, how does that sort of differ around the world in terms of markets? Say Australia versus Asia or Europe.
Well, Australia's just got different challenges. I mean, some of the things I spoke about earlier. I mean, we literally are this out in the Western Territory, I think you call it. There's 140 microgrids where they have solar, and then they have battery, and then they have diesel failover, and you can't really put an electric charger for EVs in there. It'll knock the grid down. I mean, the whole space, the dynamics in Australia with the lower population and a
vast land.
It's phenomenal. I was with one of our water customers, and it's all about irrigation and how do you manage that and charge for that. So every market's a little bit unique in that regard. But some of the deals in Europe are big B2C, B2B books that we're engaging with now on a sales process. Some of the deals in Asia are mostly countrywide suppliers. You need to be careful. I mean, there was a story there where they landed on us, and I can't get into who it was, but they landed a system a few years ago, 8 years ago, and after they put the system in, they billed the country wrong. I mean, that's when the prime minister talks to the CEO. I mean, you have to really. But that's fun. That makes it makes the job interesting.
And what does a normal day look like for you in terms of work?
I'm pretty busy. It seems to be back to back. I'm not really good at reading manuals and reports. I'm more of I like to bring a bunch of smart people in the room and talk about, brainstorm about something we'll need to do, and then let them run with it, and then have a checkpoint, and then go see it near the end. Because I trust my team a lot, but I also like to have be a part of the brainstorm. So my day's filled with a lot of dialogue, actually, really, from start to stop. My wife would probably like to see me do a little less of it, but you have to take yourself with you. So, yeah, there we go.
And how do you sort of look at Gentrack, or maybe even just your enthusiasm for Gentrack from day one? New gig, sort of a bit to do to now.
Look, it's been a really a huge learning. It's been it's been a privilege. I can say that there were some hard times. The UK regulator, knocked 40 retailers out of the UK market. I wouldn't read into that as a global type of trend. That was a really unique kind of situation that I don't think will be repeated. Surely not in our markets, But anyway, that at one point because of the price cap there, we were losing a customer a week. That was I was like, wow.
Stark, yeah.
Now, once again, all that's behind the industry and behind Gentrack. But that was a pretty wild moment. But then I thought, it's only the B2C business, only in the UK that the regulator is doing this, and the rest of the world has to change. And it's, I love the UK, but it's still, it's Ireland in Europe. I mean, there's still a lot of other countries. And so we just, I'm a big believer in epigenetics, which is, you create your own petri dish. And so we set our targets and our objectives as a company, and everybody just rolled behind it. And we just left that mess behind. It was pretty good. Yeah.
And so in terms of calendar year 2024, what do you think the sort of key things that investors should be looking for, or what are your sort of goals to, is it a tier one? Is it, new countries, etc.? What's sort of key focus?
If you're a supplier that has 500,000, 3 to 3 million meter points, and you have B2C and B2B, nobody does it better.
Yeah.
Now, we service tier ones. The largest energy supplier by volume in the UK is on our system. Bulb, 3 million meter points, had the best metrics in the UK for cost to serve. They're on our system, so we can support big systems. We are in discussions with several big suppliers today on the B2C side. We would like to win those. We're also in discussions with some big B2B books, and we're well positioned to win those. But these things take time. In the meantime, we have a lot of other deals that we're landing and expanding around. So I think it's going to be a good year. I'm optimistic. What I really want to see is I want to see this industry just accelerate, get off the old, move forward. It needs. We need to do it for the planet. We need to, honestly, we need to do it. So it's not like it's a fiction thing that's happening out there. This is we need to solve the carbon problem, and technology. Look, consumers will vote with their feet. Regulators will put in regulation. Politicians will put in targets. But eventually, it's going to be the technology that drives a lot of this. And so I want Gentrack to be a leader in that space.
Because I've heard you describe yourself as a tree hugger previously.
A little bit, yeah. I think, yeah.
What there's so many sort of.
I don't own a car, for example.
That was what I was going to say. But there's so many sort of obviously a huge transformation in terms of this space. How do you sort of look at ESG? Like obviously you're enabling, particularly with Amber Electric and these sort of different initiatives and whatnot. How do you sort of look at your impact there?
Look, we've taken a specific focus on reduction of plastics in the water systems because I think it's so atrocious what's happening with that area, and we're doing we're piloting some amazing programs like Camden Clean and things like that. I do think that we want to invest more in the decarbonization. So like this investment in Amber is us, really kind of putting our money where we said we'd put it. Our project at Energy Australia is all around reduction of solar and battery. In general, you use about 1/8 of the power from the grid that you would if you didn't have a battery and solar. So that's an amazing. Think about 1/8 to the neighbor that doesn't have one. So the world needs to make this transition. And we just want to be a central part of making sure that happens. Now, on the ESG front, I do think we need to be careful about greenwashing. I also don't want to see, like, my team say, hey, let's measure this and measure that and measure that and fill in these reports. I'm like, guys, let's put our money on these programs, set some targets, and just do the right thing by it. And I'd rather not get too caught up in the reporting, although I understand why they have it and that is important also.
Yeah. I think if you set targets just for the sake of setting targets, then you end up finding
you
yourself.
have to be careful about it.
Yeah.
You have to take it seriously.
3 to 5 years, how do you sort of look at Gentrack?
Look, we have this thing where our next step is 50 million meter points in 15 countries, but to me, that's just the first step. It's a momentum step. The next one's 400 million meter points in 40 countries. 400 million meter points probably won't be on my watch, but as we talked about in the beginning, for me, this was never a turnaround. We had to stabilize the platform so we could springboard onto a global leadership position. But I think my objective is to set that momentum and infrastructure in place to just continue to capture this space for the next 10 years. This transition to re-platform is a 10-year program. Just work after work after work for capable companies. And then, then it'll be probably less of a heavy lift, but it'll also be higher margin, different type of running that business.
And a huge recurring revenue base, obviously, as well.
Exactly, yeah.
And you talked about not being on your watch. How do you what sort of legacy? You're obviously not finishing up yet, and you've got a hell of a lot to do, but what sort of legacy do you want to leave at Gentrack once you're done?
Yeah, well, I'd like to leave that legacy of leadership. I'd like to leave the legacy of a leading company that's purposeful, that treats its people well and delivers on what we commit to deliver. I don't think you can ask for more than that. I don't know how to articulate it
I think
any other way, but
comes through in your voice.
That's pretty much what we're trying to do.
Gary, great to have you in town. Well done with the success so far.
Yeah.
Good luck for the future. It sounds like there's a stack left. Anything closing remarks on your side?
No, well, you guys have an amazing reputation, and I think you have a good following. And people listen to what you guys are highlighting, so it's good to be here with you, Simon, and we look forward to doing more of it and seeing y'all's success.
Bring it on. Big 2024. Cheers.
Right, good stuff.
Thanks, man.
All right. Cheers.